All right. Um,
I think
I don't
I
know.
got in as host.
Yes?
But I don't see. Are you waiting?
Yes. No, wait a minute. Let me go back.
Okay, I see you.
Yeah.
I'm going to admit
Okay.
you.
So you were the host.
I signed in.
Recording in progress.
Oops. Let's get off our phones.
Okay, you signed in.
Through the hub Zoom.
Okay, so I should be able to learn how to do that, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you'll tell me, I'll ask you tomorrow.
Great. And I will tell you.
Okay, good.
Hi, Carol. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. You look familiar. Are you
Do
Mindy?
I? I'm Mindy.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I'm from the UUCM, and I think I've met you through Becky. You and Becky are good friends.
Yes. That explains everything. Yes, Becky and I are good friends.
Why do I know
I've
that?
known Becky like my whole life.
Yes, exactly. I do believe that she told me once that your parents were her inspiration for her lifetime of advocacy. So, and she's quite an advocate. So, you must have had incredible parents.
I did. I was fortunate to have incredible parents. Lifetime of trying to live up to.
Yes, I understand. I now have generations in their 50s who are trying to live up to my father, their grandfather, and I keep telling them, just forge your own path. You're doing fine. But so often we're fortunate to live in a family where people have left quite a legacy, and I feel that way too.
Yeah, it's a cool thing.
Yeah, it really is, and I'm really excited about this because UUCM has just, in the last 6 months, formed a mental health task force.
Oh.
And I'm fortunate enough to be the coordinator. So when someone forwarded this to me, I thought, oh, I have to make sure I tune in and listen.
Oh, well, that is so great. That is so great to hear. Well, Edgar's a great facilitator. It's just a conversation. It's not a listening. It's really a conversation.
Well,
because we all agreed we actually, we're kind of in uncharted territory here, right?
mhm.
Yeah. In fact, that was the title of Thomas Friedman's column in the Times, Sunday Times today. We've never been here before.
I know. Yes. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I tried to read the Sunday Times review section these days with one eye open and the other one praying. This was a tough read today about
very tough
Thomas
read
Friedman
today.
and the article about the opinion piece about abortion and Catholic hospitals. Did you read that one?
No, I didn't.
Don't read it. Don't read it.
Okay, I won't.
It's too true. It's too true and too sad.
Ugh.
Yes. But one piece of interesting news that one of the members of our congregation just told me about, because we were talking about our upcoming Seder, and I'm the fallen Methodist turn you who makes the matzo balls each year. So anyway, we were talking about how many we would need, and I was talking about the fact that I had just read that there were more. The Jewish population of the Ukraine per capita was larger than any other place in the world other than Israel. And she said, "Did you know that Fiddler on the Roof was based in a Ukrainian village?" And I did not know that. So there's just so many connections. So many connections. Anyway, I'm looking forward to being mostly a listener in your conversation, if you don't mind.
No, and there's no listeners. It's a conversation. So welcome to the conversation.
Thank you.
Hi, Edgar. How are you?
Hey, how are you? Good. Well, it's good afternoon here too, on the West Coast.
It is.
Nice to meet you, Susan and Carol.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Susan and I have vowed to perfect how is it that we get into the Zoom for Faith+Works, because It's some obscure pathway and nobody actually knows, but we come and have a heart attack every once a month.
We've
But,
cracked
we're
part of the
not-
code.
We're not going to do that again.
Okay, yes,
We're going to actually know what we're supposed to do.
right.
And Carol is from the Unitarian Church in Montclair. which
Lovely
is-
to meet you.
Oh, nice.
And said she's part of are you part of, Carol, or you're chairing this new mental health task force?
I'm chairing this new mental health task force.
So she thought she would join us for this
That's
conversation.
lovely. Great. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you're in search of Rosetta Stone for this particular event.
We'll see.
We'll see, right?
We'll see. That's my response. We'll see.
I'm on a meeting now.
Yeah, I
It's
host
the church.
reading
Check out the
groups
croissants.
every
We forgot
Saturday.
about it.
It alternates what
Uh-huh.
the content is, and it's always like, it's always a bit of an adventure because my internet, depending on the day, can be really good or I can freeze. So I've just told the members, when I freeze, just go on, right? I'll come back eventually. I'm the host, but they're fine.
Now, does your reading group have to do with mental health?
Well, that's a good question. I think the reading group itself is a mental health intervention, which I didn't expect
Absolutely.
that to be
Yep.
the case. It actually has, Mindy actually was one of the first persons in the first round. One is a Capital Volume 1 by Karl Marx reading group. And the other, and it was two groups at the beginning, one healthcare workers and the other was ministers of color, basically.
Mhm.
And then this round, it's been Black Reconstruction by W. Du Bois. We literally finished it yesterday.
Mhm.
And the other one is Capital, Volume 1. So I think what we're moving on to after, well, when the spring begins, later in the spring, is the writings of Franz Fanon. Hey, how are you, Frank?
Ah,
And I think I'm going to be doing Capital Volume 1 at U of O. Molly asked me to do that, so maybe I'll do that.
Hey,
It'd be
Frank.
nice to have another.
Hello.
Hello, Frank. Hey, Frank.
Nice to see everyone.
Good to meet you.
Frank, do you know Edgar?
Well, I've seen Edgar on other Zooms that we've had. I think the last Faith+Works Edgar was on, but I haven't officially met him. So it's nice to meet you, Edgar.
Good to meet you, Frank. We've corresponded, once
Yes.
or twice.
That's
Hey, Charlie. How are you? Another
Good,
person I've
Edgar. How you
corresponded
doing?
with. Yeah.
Yep, nice to see you.
Nice to see you again.
Hey, Charlie.
Hey, Frank. Hi, everybody. Hey, Carol. Hey, Susan. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, Charlie.
That's good. That's good.
Good to see you, Charlie.
Hi,
How's
Mindy.
life in France?
We just got back, and Eloise is hopefully going to go to sleep soon. A bit of jet lag issues biting us later than expected, so we'll see. But it's good to be here. Thank you. Things are going well.
Yeah, that's a lot of jet lag, right? That's a long flight. Did you fly direct?
No, we flew Denver to Munich and then Munich to Lyon.
Wow.
Yeah,
Are you
Yeah.
living in Lyon?
we're living in Grenoble.
Grenoble, sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, we moved here at the end of August.
Oh, that's right. I remember that now.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember
yes, we've
that.
been here about 6 months now.
Lovely, lovely. La belle
Yeah.
France.
Ouais, ouais, c'est super ici, hein? Yeah, tomorrow I'm starting an intensive French class. So
Okay, go ahead.
it's pretty
Bon
good,
chance.
but
Bon
merci,
chance.
hein? Merci. Ouais, j'ai besoin de tout le chance que j'ai pu trouver. C'est
Oh,
ça.
bon. Well, your little one's gonna like.
Yeah, they suck it up. It's
Yeah,
great.
they're like sponges, man. I like sponges.
Well, should we start?
Mal.
Hi, Molly.
Hey,
Good to see
Molly.
you.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, man.
Hi.
Yeah.
So would we like to start?
Yeah.
I see everybody nodding. Great. Okay. So, hi, I'm Mindy Fully Love, president of the congregation, and I'm going to read a poem to get us started. So, the Poetry Foundation has a Black History Month collection that they put together, and this is from that correct collection. And it's called Praise Song for the Day by Elizabeth Alexander. And it's a poem for Barack Obama's presidential inauguration. Each day we go about our business, walking past each other, catching each other's eyes or not, about to speak or speaking. All about us is noise. All about us is noise and bramble, thorn and din, each one of our ancestors on our tongues. Someone is stitching up a hymn, darning a hole in a uniform, patching a tire, repairing the things in need of repair. Someone is trying to make music somewhere, with a pair of wooden spoons on an oil drum, with cello, boombox, harmonica, voice. A woman and her son wait for the bus. A farmer considers the changing sky. A teacher says, "Take out your pencils, begin." We encounter each other in words, words spiny or smooth, whispered or declaimed, words to consider, reconsider. We cross dirt roads and highways that mark the will of someone and then others who said, "I need to see what's on the other side." I know there's somewhere better down the road. We need to find a place where we are safe. We walk into that which we cannot yet see. Say it plain, that many have died for this day. Sing the names of the dead who brought us here, who laid the train tracks, raised the bridges, picked the cotton and the lettuce, built brick by brick the glittering edifices they would then keep clean and work inside of. Praise song for struggle, praise song for the day, praise song for every hand-lettered sign, the figuring it out at kitchen tables. Some live by love thy neighbor as thyself, others by first do no harm or take no more than you need. What if the mightiest word is love? Love beyond marital, filial, national, love that casts a widening pool of light, love with no need to preempt grievance. In today's sharp sparkle, this winter air, anything can be made, any sentence begun. On the brink, on the brim, on the cusp, praise song for walking forward in that light. Isn't that great?
Man.
So today Edgar is going to facilitate us in having a conversation, and I'm delighted to say that Carol is here from the UU Montclair Church, where they've just started a task force on mental health. So she'll be joining us, and the issue on the table is, what is pastoral care in such terrible times, and how do we take care of our congregation? Carol's got a few more people on her plate than we have on ours, but we have the whole world too needing care right now. And what are we to do? I was thinking that, and Carol was agreeing with me that the headlines in the paper today and all the pieces in the Weekend Review were just so heavy and terrible. So as if there wasn't enough, then now there's more. So what are we to do? So we're really lucky to know Edgar, as we all know, because the Jesuits got him very young and taught him a lot, and took him to liberation struggles and got on his last nerve, so he left them. And then, he became an anthropologist and met a lot of cultures and a lot of people. And so he knows from those different traditions, the tradition of the Jesuits and the tradition of the anthropologists, and his own lived experience as a Puerto Rican from Jersey City, a lot about what are the questions we're supposed to ask, as well as what are the actions we're supposed to take. So Edgar, we're so honored you're here with us, and wondering if you could kick off this conversation.
Great. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's lovely to be with all of you. Some I've known, some I haven't known. I corresponded with some of you. And of course, there's a couple of comrades of mine, Mindy, Molly, Doug, from the People's CDC, that continuing work and the challenges therein, and the graces. one of the things, well, first of all, I just want to point out that my door is open. My nieces aren't here, so I can actually keep the door open. So there's not going to be a lot of ambient sound. I'm in East Los Angeles. I came here for love, love of my nieces. I was helping to raise them in Jersey City with their two moms, and one of the moms is from here. My sister-in-law is from Boyle Heights. So I'm here, situated in this ground, doing work here with medical students and some folks from the Los Angeles tenant unions and other folks. So one of the questions I've sort of been thinking about is this question of pastoral strategy, right, in these times. I do a lot of things, but one of the things I also do is I'm a spiritual director in what I call the Ignatian tradition, but it's really like a neo-post-Ignatian tradition because I'm not a Catholic, obviously, but I think there's a lot to learn around discernment. And one of the things I've learned in doing this work and applying it to myself in terms of what Ignatius would call of Loyola, the discernment of spirits, is that my experience, at least, has been that God works through my desires, or what we consider the universal spirit works in our desires. And that part of the discernment process is always sorting out those desires, right? And figuring out, you know, whose voice is this? Who are you, right? And because the systems we live in are like desire producing machines, we have to sort of have a poised approach to desire, the kind of poise that dancers have before they begin to dance, a sort of sense of being in your body, but also being able to be in motion. And one way to think about that is sort of spiritual indifference. Now, that's not the best language. It's Ignatius's language. I think more of the question of spiritual flexibility, to see things as, you know, we could do this or we can do that, and to be free, right, to choose different paths. So when I think about pastoral strategy, I think about the question of care, right? Like, how do we care for ourselves and the people and the communities we're in and that we're connected to and we're entangled to, and communities that we're not so entangled with? How do we care for them? And a pastoral strategy, and it's sort of funny to use strategy because a lot of times when we think about strategy, we think about, you know, like a campaign that needs to be won, whereas pastoral strategy is, how do we do the spiritual work that gets us to the point that we can, A, identify the barriers that are blocking us from being free to love, right? And B, to have those conversations collectively, right? And a lot of the pastoral discernment, really, I guess that's what I'm really talking about, is figuring out what are like concrete needs that we have, and what are, and concrete doesn't mean not spiritual, right? What are these concrete needs that we have, and how do we, in figuring that out, use our soul work, our spirit work, to definitely work on ourselves and heal and have communities, but move forward, right? And I think that living in the crisis that we are living in and have been living in for a while, a lot of us are tired and frustrated. And some of, like, my students are hopeless. I mean, the despair, right? And they're young, right? And that's okay to despair, to be in that space at times. And I think the thing that I sort of try to keep on talking to them about is, well, okay, be in that despair, but what's the story of that despair? What's the narrative of that despair? So in one sense, I'm saying, whose spirit is this and what's your name, right? And I think that this question of collective discernment or pastoral discernment is about an inventory of our needs so we can build unity. And we know that unity is built by people recognizing concrete shared needs in their differentiality, right? So if someone needs dialysis, that's a different set of needs, right? If someone needs companionship, that may be a different need. So that unity is built in figuring out, okay, what are our desires as a faith community? What can we do? And how do we also employ, I've been using this term at the People's CDC, I hope to good effect, I don't know, generative humility. How do we engage in a type of generative humility so we don't take on more than we can, but do the work that's before us? And strategy is, for me at least, if you will, spiritual or pastoral strategy is about in what ways do we accompany each other that makes sense for us now, given our capacities, and in what ways do we accompany the communities that we're accountable to, responsible for, affiliated with, identify with. And I think that piece of discerning that is a collective work. Because, of cultural reasons, the United States is a place, and I'm speaking here as an anthropologist, is a place where the template, the fallback, if you will, is always more or less psychological, therapeutic, and moralistic. Now, I'm not against psychology, I'm not against therapy, God knows where I would be without therapy, but it's more along the lines of, okay, that is not enough. We need another template about collective recovery, collective work, collective healing, community building, that gets us beyond the simple psychological. So that the task, I think, and this is something that I'm working on always, I hope, is how do you do collective discernment, right? And the first thing I would say is you got to come to the process willing to be someplace else than when you began, collectively, right? And that the collective discernment is about saying, in this historical moment, first of all, how do we name it? But what are the forces at play that we understand to be freedom forces, forces of healing, forces that will allow us to breathe for the love of God? And what are the forces that are unfreedom forces that get us to circulate into, the night of the ego, the dark night of the capitalist ego, if you will? And so these kind of discernments are an act of vulnerability, because as you come together, you sort of have to begin to ask, okay, what is our tradition as a Faith+Works group, right? As a Unitarian church, what are the institutions that we've built, and what are the things and desires that we have, and tools and capacities that we can bring to this kind of collective recovery, community regeneration. And I'm more and more convinced that you don't need a lot of people. All you need is people who are open to being, in another place than where they began. And I guess this is more like a spiritual thing, people who really have a desire for wisdom in a time of crisis, right? And I have a pastor friend of mine who's now living in Las Vegas, of all places. Her better pastoring work really was in Queens. She's an AME, African Methodist Episcopal friend of mine. And she said when the pandemic began, all she did was read the Book of Wisdom and try to ask for wisdom in this time. And so I guess the question that I would begin the discussion with would be, what are our desires as a community? A community on a journey at this moment. And again, keeping that generative humility in mind, because if we don't have limits, we're in trouble. I had a very interesting moment with Mindy the other day. We were in the collective recovery group, and she said, look, if this People's CDC doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. We move on. And I thought to myself, good for you, Mindy. That's an incredible amount of freedom, right? Because it's not like this idea of we must be successful, right? It was like this idea of is this for us to do? And if we can't do it, then we walk away from it freely and with love, right? Knowing that the people that we've engaged, even in that couple of weeks that we've been involved, have grown as a result of it. And I'm sure of that. I'm positive people have grown just out of knowing each other. So I think that that's the other piece, like that generative humility, to really ask yourself, what is that I can do, right? What are the gifts that I can bring? And in that language of Ignatius, Bosque, counter-Catholic Reformation, florid language of the Baroque, he will say, what can you do? What will I do with my 10,000 ducats, right? But really the question is not what will you do with your 10,000 ducats, but what will we do with these resources we have that we've created amongst ourselves and with other people? So that's a broad question, but I've talked enough. Let's have a conversation.
I feel as though this is completely overwhelming, completely huge. And I hear the word pastoral care, and that feels like I'm not trained for that. I need to be trained. And the other thing I think when I think about pastoral care is, oh God, I have to have something that is going to fix this. I mean, somebody comes with, oh, this is a pandemic and I'm struggling through 2 years already, and what do I do? And my response in my head is, I've got to say something. I've got to say something that'll make them feel better. And as you were talking, I thought, really, the only thing that has ever worked for me in any kind of engagement, in any situation, is just to start asking questions of the person and talk without any expectation or demand of myself or of them. It's just be willing to surrender to the fact I'm with another person, and there has to be even no figuring out. Just stand there and see what comes. It seems to me gentler and probably more productive than my figuring out a strategy, for God's sake. Oh no.
I hear that.
I rest my case.
Yes. The motion is accepted. I think that one of the things I would say is, I learned that in Central America as a young man, was it's accompaniment. It's not fixing, right? I mean, I think that's the key thing, that that the way they used it was, acompañamiento pastoral, which was pastoral accompaniment. You weren't going to fix it. You were just going to walk with folks, right? And even the act of asking people questions is an act of care, right? Yeah. William Stringfellow, the great Episcopal lawyer, troublemaker, lay theologian, the guy who, when Dan Berrigan went underground, the FBI found him in Stringfellow's house in Block Island. Stringfellow would say that listening is the most ancient form of love, right? That's what binds us together. And I think that what you just identified was the problem of the word strategy, right? And also for me, I hear, at least when I hear pastoral strategy or pastoral care could be a demand. You must fix this crisis for me. Or it could be an invitation to accompaniment in that person's bewilderment and your own bewilderment at circumstances that are so overwhelming. And I think there's also a masculinist piece to it, right? I'm actually first a sex and gender anthropologist before I became a medical anthropologist. So the masculinist piece is, oh, I got to fix it, and one of the great things of living with two, very empowered Latina lesbians is they never want me to fix a damn thing. They're like, step back, we'll take care of this, brother. And I think that there's something very masculinist And I think you've identified that, Susan, very well. And what I heard from what you were saying was, damn, it's overwhelming. And I think that's the most consistent word I've heard from my students in all my classes. When I have Zoom classes and physical classes, I do check-ins now, which I never used to do with my students. And that's the key. If there's a key word, it's one of those, overwhelmed. So I really appreciate what you said. Thank you for that.
And my first thought when I listened to Susan say it was overwhelming and I have to be trained, referred back to the training that our new pastoral care team received here in Montclair, conducted by our female co-minister and our community minister, whose expertise is in the world of hospice. And a significant part of their 15-month training involved just what you were talking about, Susan, about listening and just being a presence, not even talking, just being a presence for someone who is in some kind of difficulty. In my area of advocacy, it's a mental health difficulty. Obviously, in pastoral care, it's a variety of things. And as much reading as I've been trying to do the last few years, that seems to be the answer to with people who are, if they're not in an active mental health crisis, but are worried about a crisis, that seems to be the most beneficial action that we can take if we are not a professional, if we're not therapists, is just be a presence and acknowledge their reality. So.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's also important to, because Susan started with such a powerful statement, I find it overwhelming. I feel overwhelmed. Is that, and Edgar, you said your students all feel overwhelmed. I feel overwhelmed. Doesn't everybody feel overwhelmed? It's like Putin might go to nuclear weapons next. This is overwhelming. So maybe pastoral care begins at home, right? Maybe I have to. I was talking to Maricela Gomez, who's our Zen master guru, and I realized, Edgar, you and she are on the same path, just slightly different religious traditions. Anyway, she was saying how she was having some physical problems and she just had to sit with herself, which I found to be that's weird, right? Like she was sitting next to her own pain. Like isn't the pain in your body? How do you sit next to your body? But anyway, but on the other hand, in this conversation, I'm thinking maybe I have to sit next to myself and just comfort myself for how overwhelmed I feel. And I think that this whole like pastoral care is overwhelming. Like I feel overwhelmed. How could I take care of anybody else? But perhaps first I have to take care of myself before I could listen to anybody else. I have to just kind of sit quietly. And there was a nice piece in the review of the week about grief. Just that we just have to welcome, not welcome, but there's just a lot of grief. Like I just feel such grief about this invasion of Ukraine. And then, as I've talked about obsessively all week, my former chairman of the Department of Psychiatry, where I worked for almost 30 years, was fired because he made this insanely racist tweet. And I've just been walking around feeling sorry for myself, like that. Just like, I don't know, for some reason it just brought like the weight of like how hard it is to, like, he was a racist before. It wasn't unknown that he was a racist, but he was like quiet, buttoned down, it was in his affect, not it was just, it permeated everything. It was just like it was the way of the world. And all of a sudden, so anyway, just been feeling like the grief for my own life under for some reason it was like searingly revealing of what it's like to live in racism. So I've been feeling also overwhelmed for myself, So I don't know how I get to pastoral care, but maybe that is pastoral care, is just to say, this is just really hard. And I'm so glad that we can have this conversation today, because um, you're all my spiritual community. And, it, just, this is more than I can bear alone.
For me, hearing what Susan said and what Carol said and your comments, Mindy, and thinking about this for the last couple of days, I said to my wife the other day, I said, with the invasion, the situation in the Ukraine, how upsetting it is. And her first response is, well, don't watch that. Don't listen to that. And I thought, that's not the answer. I really have to listen to this. And it is moving me more than any violence or political action than that's happened in the past. And I don't know, I I am just beside myself, feeling for the Ukrainian people and the courage that's coming from there, the courage that's coming from the president of the Ukraine, and so I've been thinking of ways to make myself feel a little better about it, or at least feel comfortable enough to listen to it and to process it. And I have started relying on some Catholic prayers that I knew from my youth. I looked up the Rosary, saying the Rosary. I never really did that as a young person, but I'm finding some comfort in the in a kind of a meditative way in saying a rosary. It's new to me, but it's interesting. But I also feel that, like you all have said, that sitting beside yourself and allowing yourself to feel this pain and to experience it, and also realizing that you don't necessarily have answers, you just have compassion. You have yourself, and you have someone with you, and the human connection is what I think is the key to that pastoral care. And you can say something of some try to come up with some wisdom, but chances are the fact that you're just expressing love in such a profound way by doing that, I think it can be the only thing that can be expected. And allowing yourself to fail, if that's loving yourself enough, caring about yourself enough to extend yourself to someone else, and allowing yourself not to have the answers, but to have just the human concern and love in that connection. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. But I think that cushion for me is some sort of meditation, prayer, and that's helping me to kind of do some of the things that I want to do.
This conversation is so brilliant because it's making me put together something really important to me, is that what I want if I'm in a crisis is another human being. I want another human being with me. And in order for me to be a human being, it's good to be willing to understand how I feel. What do I feel? Mm-hmm. What am I going through? And not run away from that. I become a larger human by doing that. And then I'm more comfortable being next to another human being who has their own, I understand the struggle of not wanting to feel, of wanting to run away. And I don't have to fix that. I can't fix that in myself, and I can't fix that in anybody else. But I swear to God, the presence of somebody else is certainly enough. For me, it's always enough. So, wow.
Oscar talked about generative humility. And I wonder if this situation in Ukraine now, because of our own feelings of vulnerability, that there's no way we can solve it. You know, at the age of 80, the closest I came to this was during the Cold War and the worries in the Cold War. But we were living in a different United States in the Cold War, number one, and I was younger, but in my mind, it was we considered ourselves a stronger power and more a sort of an equal with Russia. And what's gone on in the last several years, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years, and the incredible division in our country puts us, I believe, in a very vulnerable place. And I think many other people believe the same thing. And I personally feel as inadequate as I ever have felt as an American citizen to make a difference in what's going on in this situation. And I think that kind of humility may give us a new sense of the ability to just sit and listen, but because we are vulnerable. We don't feel that we can make a change. Which is a new feeling for lots and lots of Americans. And I wonder if that in the long run won't make us more humble, will not foster this sense of generative humility that Oscar talked about at the beginning of the discussion, that will give us a better ability to sit with someone in crisis, whatever it is, and not offer advice. Because most of us, when we get to a certain age, are really, really good at offering advice, especially if we're Unitarian Universalists. We're experts at it. Oh boy, are we good. This kind of situation where we really don't know what the hell to do, okay? And as Mindy said, we need to take care of ourselves. I think may indeed, as horrible as it is, foster something in us as a collective group of people that may in the long run make us more able to assist people in crisis and able to offer pastoral care. That's my hope. That's my aspiration, as you know, as a member of a large congregation that is engaging on pastoral care and mental health and all that kind of thing, where we really never did in an explicit way anyway. So.
Yeah, I really concur with a lot of the things that folks have been saying in terms of, well, I guess I like to call it the productivity of failure, that there are failures that are really productive for us to experience, right? That they begin to ask us some very basic questions about who am I in relationship to this pain, right? The Germans have that word, right? Weltschmerz, world pain. And I think for many generations in this country, some folks, not all, had a buffer, right? And I think starting with the events of actually 2001, the 9/11 events, there seems to be an acceleration of a sense of decline, vulnerability, polarization. And what I noticed y'all were doing was what I saw in Central America amongst the liberation theologians, was that the discernment was the historical moment, that discernment is always about a type of historicity, that it really does imply the materiality of the spirit, and to put it in a very strange way. So Frank, of course, the rosary, the beads, and after a while you lose sense of what you're even saying, and then you go to what I would call the real.
I don't use the beads. I just say the prayers.
There
I
you
don't
go.
have the beads.
The mantra. I'll send you
I'm a
some
little-
beads, Frank.
I kind of exposed. I'm a little embarrassed. Well, not embarrassed by it, but it was something kind of corny. But that's not the point. But I think, yeah, I get. Yeah. It's rare.
Yeah, and our family
Laughing at
also-
myself for this, but yeah.
No, it's cool because I mean, there's lots of traditions, whether it's Islam or
Yeah.
the Buddhist tradition or the Rosary tradition. It's all about this question of like, how do you materially, literally put your fingers on these anxieties and these woes and these worries? I mean, part of it, you know, for me at least, is that there's a terrible politics at play.
Yeah.
Right? That there's a mobilization of, in the old language, theologically speaking, of evil, right? And I think sometimes you can forget that kind of old language, and the power of that language, many ways, is that when you call something evil, you got to figure out what your relationship to it is. And I think what we're seeing today is a group of people literally taking up arms to defend themselves in the light of an imperial assault, right? By someone, you know, who's like Bozo Stalin, but who can kill people, right? I mean, and I think that piece is also part of the discernment. And there's a tension. The more you take in the political aspects and the historical aspects, the more the possibility of being overwhelmed, right? Cognitively, right? Just at the level of trying to understand what's happening. And I think that the invitation to discernment is not like a holiday from conflict, right? It's actually a learning how to spiritually enter it in a deeper way. I have one of the Jesuits that I admired most in Central America, who I was too shy to really talk to him. I just read his writings. He spent many years living amongst the Mayan population that were being basically decimated in Guatemala. He literally lived with la comunidades de resistencia, the communities of resistance, and he had to make a choice. And he writes about this actually in Spanish, which is really powerful. He said, I had to make a choice. Was I there as an anthropologist, a priest, or did I want to be part of the guerrilla movement? And he said, no, I wanted to be with folks as a priest and as an anthropologist. And I knew that my role was to be there. And I wasn't able to solve the problem. I would never take up arms, but I understood that these were the people I needed to be with for me to become something other than I was, right? And I think that there's that, I think we're facing that moment in a lot of ways in the United States. Like, and it's, you know, I come from a part of my tradition is the Marxist tradition. And, you know, we're always like, we love a good crisis. Like we're always predicting a good crisis, right? And then when it comes, it's not that nice because you can see the kind of suffering that we're talking about. And I think we're encountering a social suffering and we're not separate from it. Right? We're not separate from it. In my case, I mean, just to be honest, I mean, I've lost 3 relatives to COVID in the last less than 2 years. My mother, the patriarch of our family in Puerto Rico, and the matriarch of our family in Jersey City in February. Within 3 days, they died of COVID, right? Why did they die? One, well, they didn't vaccinate her, foolishness, right? Another is just the conditions of life that people have and what it means to be like, you know, caught up in this sort of crisis. And so I think that the one thing I do say to my students is that in many ways, the spiritual life is a preparation for, you know, being in a place and letting go. Right. And I think we in the US have been in a place for a long time, right, as an empire, right? And the floor has sort of been changed, has sort of cracked. And I think that the faith communities that we're part of, and I'm part of a couple at this point, we're all dealing with this. We're all dealing with this. And I guess one of the things, I mean, when my mom died and I was isolated in my apartment in Jersey City and I couldn't see my sister and her wife who was 3 blocks away, and my nieces and my other family, some comfort for me was to say I'm not alone. There's lots of people going through this mourning, right? And the other two comforts was my father always saying to me, "This is hell," right? That this is hell. Like, there's no hell over there. This is hell. But at the same time, he would say that in his garden, where he was growing vegetables. He was growing tomatoes and eggplants and cucumbers. And he said, always stay close to the land, even if, and I think that piece, the conjuncture of his, like, this is really hell, right? And the other piece of him tilling the soil, because he was a farm boy, actually. I grew up in the farm, Puerto Rico. But I think that part of that remains with me. I wrote a piece called this, Hell Hath No Fury, like a multiplex complex. And the beginning of it is in my father's garden. And I think that piece of, like, you saying the rosary, or folks taking on the mental health piece of their congregation, being trained, I think that's about the garden. That's about, we're going to try to grow our souls, right? To quote Grace Lee Boggs. So, I mean, that's part of it. And I'm I have to say, I'm very honored to witness this kind of discernment that y'all are doing right now.
I wanted to say that, Frank, I was very comforted when you shared that you were praying the rosary, because it was so concrete. It was like a helpful suggestion. So I had a lot of gratitude when you said that, because I have some prayer beads that I use from. It's not a rosary, but it's prayer beads that I use from time to time, and it reminded me, oh yeah, I could pull out my prayer beads. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure. I think one of the other things that makes us feel somewhat vulnerable, in a broader sense, in a political sense, is the state of democracy, is the state of our country right now. And there was a time when, there was a certain amount of strength that you derived from living in a country that was welcoming, or at least ideally that was welcoming, and that was, that cared about the rule of law and such. I mean, obviously there are cracks and fissures in that are just profound, but I think there was a certain amount of strength that gave you as well. And now we're teetering. Everybody feels totally vulnerable over the recent political situation in this country. And then when you think of these folks in Ukraine and what's happening to them, it's just beyond belief. And there is a real comparison there. There is a really I think we are really seeing evil in action in Putin, and I think we're seeing grace in an incredible way on the part of the Ukrainians. And I just hope that we have the ability to help them and support them. I'm beginning to wonder about that. It continues to make you feel even like more vulnerable. How do you give people hope under these circumstances? I think hope is really, I mean, how do you help someone get away from what it is that's overwhelming them, as Susan pointed out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I keep on struggling to finish this book, Love Comes in Knots. And, because I've been in some secular context, people ask me, how can I be a believer? And I often say, well, I don't have faith. People give it to me. I have a beggar's luck when it comes to faith. It's not a possession I have. And I think that it's sort of analogous to hope. And I'm going to tell you a story. I have a Black Reconstruction group, and one of the members is Paul Sinkler, who's a, cradle Episcopalian and was for many years a state trooper, New Jersey state trooper, a Black state trooper, rose to the rank of sergeant his lovely son, who's a wonderful singer and is gay, and Paul is a totally affirmative parent, lives in Poland with his husband and has a circuit in Europe, you know? And Paul said to me on Facebook today, he said, my son has gone to the border in Poland and he saw these Africans who were in Ukraine and he took them in. And he said, these are my folks, I'm in Poland, but I want to make sure they get through. And he sort of took responsibility for them. And I said to Paul, who's part of our Black Reconstruction group, and it's so funny, he's from Brooklyn, he's a card, right? But I said, Paul, whatever we could do or whatever I can do to support the work of your son, God bless him, I do. And I thought to myself, wow, here's this young gay man in Poland who's Poland's not the most gay friendly place in the world, right? And he went to the border to see, and he saw this family, African family, and he took them in and he took them to, I think he's in Krakow. And so that gave me hope. You know, that gave me hope that there was this one guy whose dad, I said, well, you raised a good man, Paul. You raised a good man.
Well, then doesn't it mean that hope is a choice? It's not some Walt Disney feeling. It's like I look at Ukraine and the miracles that are happening there and the behavior and the great, just amazing grace, as Frank said, that I can watch. And then part of my brain goes, okay, but look at this, look at what they're up against. And this is not going to turn out like a Walt Disney movie. This is not gonna. And then there's a bigger part of me that does not want to live in a world without hope in my heart. I do not want to be alive without the choice of having hope, no matter what, because things do work. There are miracles all the time. That's a fact too.
In my training as a physician, it really was actually not about hope, because in a way you have to show up in many hopeless situations, and so it's really just about, and in a way hope becomes a judgment, like I judge this situation, and because this person is going to die, I don't have hope, whatever, it becomes negative, it has a negative connotation. And so the training was very much about just show up and do what needs to be done. And you don't have to make a judgment, and then I think you leave open the possibility for miracles. So anyway, that's definitely how it's in a way more fun to just show up, because we don't know the future. And so all I have to do is just get there. Now, getting there could be a problem, but if I get there, that's what I'm supposed to do. And then the unexpected, it's always unexpected. So that makes it.
Wow.
Anyway, that's how for me.
I think showing up is hope. I mean, I think that in and of itself is hope. It may not be stated, and I may not be saying to you, if I'm working with you or I'm sitting next to you and I'm trying to help you, that, there is hope out there. There is this, there is that. But the fact that I'm there with you, in some honest sense, is hope maybe on a broader, maybe it's a wrong choice of words, I don't know, but yeah, there's something that happens in that connection. Before the miracle happens, there's something that happens in that connection with people.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. Yeah. My students, when we were doing online with, or physical, they would say, I just can't show up. And I'd say, this is exactly the time we got to come to class. Because then you can be miserable with other people. Right? And they would laugh it off. And they would show up. Most of the time they would show up. And I think that there was something very lovely about that. Just showing up. What in the Jesuits they used to call the ministry of presence. The ministry of presence.
Yeah, that makes a couple of things. One is that having like Mindy's labeling of hope as a judgment really resonates with me, and I find the judgment of labeling something hope to be so crushing, actually. But the showing up piece feels really real. And this, I was listening to a podcast yesterday about Robin D.G. Kelly, and he talked also about how he never talks about hope, but only talks about struggle, which I thought was a really beautiful formulation. But also for me, what is like really weighing heavily at the moment is, and this I was experiencing very strongly even right at the end of last year, moving into the beginning of this year. So before the whole Ukraine situation really escalated, was a sense that after 2 years of pandemic on top of everything else, in so many of the groups I work with, so many people who have for years demonstrated such a commitment to collective showing up collectively, that across so many groups, people who's, and I, feeling this myself as well, like the conviction and the commitment and the capacity to show up feels at such a threadbare minimum right now. And which speaks to like what Frank and Mindy and Susan spoke to a little bit about, and like what Maricella's point about sitting with yourself, and also about, but so I'm really experiencing that. I'm really experiencing collective, like a bare minimum of pastoral care or whatever being reduced from a collective down to a one-on-one. But I'm also just profoundly frustrated by that as well. Like I find it really upsetting that feeling is so present, and frustrated when I come across other people whose capacity for leaning in and showing up is diminished, frustrating when I recognize that in myself. I'm experiencing it everywhere, like every group I work with, every community that I am in some way accountable to, in myself. Yeah. Not to bring us back down, but it's like whatever the opposite of a centrifugal force is, like I really feel this like very powerful scattering.
Yeah.
Centrifugal is scattering.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
okay. Centrifugal is the
But
word.
I do want to say 100 people went to the planning board meeting, and nothing like that has ever happened in our time in Orange. So, and you, Doug, you, Molly, are a very big part of that. I mean, maybe if everybody were feeling better, it would have been 1,000 people, but 100 people is I do think we're also exhausted, but it becomes easy to say, well, this is happening everywhere in every group and everything, but it's never exactly that. Do you know what I mean, Doug? Like 100 people just came to the planning board meeting and were mad and texted like crazy, and really pissed off.
Yeah.
You show up a lot, Doug. You show up a lot. Give yourself credit for that.
Yeah, but it's shouldn't feel so hard,
That's legit. I mean, I think part of it, what I'm hearing in what you're saying, Doug, is on some level, it's almost like systemic that we're reduced to one-on-one.
Yeah.
When we know we could be doing a lot more at the level of collective stuff, of the sort of like the together piece, right? I remember one of the great organizers in the South Bronx that I learned so much, a Dominican woman, a lesbian woman. She would always say, I never have a conversation with a politician. We come in mass. We never do individual. We come with like 30, 40 people, and I stay in the back, and the folks, sort of talk to them, and I think there's something to that. And I hear it as well. So I think I'm hearing you in that sense. I'm not too sure if I'm getting it right, but I think part of what you were saying was connected to that. If it's okay, I'd like to share a little something. Oh, Charlie, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I think keeps coming back to you and your rosary, Frank, but I think like you, Frank, I've kind of walked away from my early relationship with Catholicism, but Edgar, hearing you talk about it as like the tangible spirituality is like kind of thinking about practice, like a spiritual practice in a way that, I think, giving it something to feel. It's not necessarily the whack sort of dogma. That's kind of what I've always gotten caught up on, but it's like the practice of having something that helps you bring this thing into your hands is not, going to like all these things, like these traditions or practices or, confession or rosary or, taking the host in communion, like things that have always been like theoretical. I've been like, what are you guys talking about? But the turning it into something that you can do, or like that helps you bring sort of those values into into your space or into your body is something that I've never appreciated before. But, thinking about family and close friends who just are so committed, and it gives me a new understanding and appreciation for, it like takes me out of like the almost academic thinking around Catholicism, and thinking about other practices and how they're spiritual, like singing with friends, like singing with people. A friend who I've met here has it does like singing on corners sometimes with some people who he rehearses with. And it was so, it resonated so much with like our practice, Doug, of singing in the sanctuary together for so long, that I'd never really considered it a kind of a spiritual nourishment, but in so many ways it was like bringing those values to something tangible, and just sort of showing. I think everybody has different practices for that, of course, and there's so many different traditions for it, and so kind of gets back to this idea of like, it's not about the thing this person said or like this thing that I'm lifting up, but about sort of this practice of bringing these things into your hands or into your life in a way that kind of hearing somebody tell you about them never resonated with me before. But just hearing, it's percolating through in a lot of ways. And I just want to, say I appreciate the idea of practice as like spiritual nourishment, no matter what it no matter what it ends up being. So thanks, Frank, for your rosary.
I'd like to share before we end a little piece of reading, if you guys don't mind. It's actually, thank you, for the rosary piece. Thank you for those comments, Charlie. It's actually a prayer that Hildegard of Bingen, who was this 12th century mystic. She was a doctor and a pharmacist and a composer, a lyricist, and there's been sort of a revival of her writings and stuff. I ran into her in my medieval mysticism class in the seminary. So I'd just like to, read this if you don't mind, and then I got to go. I have a phone call with a comrade from the South. So it goes, a heart so wise, O holy power who forged the way for us. You penetrate all in heaven and earth, and even down below. You're everything in one. Through you, clouds billow and roll, and winds fly. Seeds drip juice, springs bubble out into brooks, and spring's refreshing green flows through you over all the earth. Holy power, you also lead my spirit into fullness. Holy power, blow wisdom in my soul, and with your wisdom, joy.
Mm.
So this 12th century proto-feminist mystic, I wanted to share that with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Edgar.
You're
Wow.
welcome. Take care of yourselves.
Yeah.
Thank you
too.
so much for being
Thank
here.
you so much, Edgar.
It was a
Thank you
pleasure.
so
It was a
much.
pleasure. Thank you for accompanying me and helping me to
Great.
discern the spirits. I'm sending you love and abundance from East Los Angeles and lots of good tacos.
Thanks, Edgar. Be well.
Bye-bye. Be well.
Oh, thank you. Good seeing you guys.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really great. I
Nice
don't know
seeing
when
you,
I've been
Penny.
to a UU service where I lost track of time.
Yeah.
I looked up
Whoa.
and I said, wait, it's after 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great to see you all.
Yeah.
Nice to see you guys.
Nice. I like this format. Maybe we can do it again sometime.
This conversation.
The conversation, yeah. It's nice.
Yeah, it was lovely.
Especially if
Need
it's
it,
with
right?
Edgar again.
What?
Sorry, Doug?
Especially if it's with Edgar again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he led a real nice, yeah, it was really nicely done.
He's such a genius. It was lovely to have this conversation, and I think very enriching, right? I think we put all the issues on the table. I don't know that we resolved any of them, but it's good to see them.
Yeah, they're not resolvable, I don't think.
No.
I don't think they are
But,
resolvable.
Undercurrent maybe underplays it, but it's there. It's good talking about it though and being present with each other, eh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Take care,
Peace
everyone.
out.
yeah,
Yeah.
great to see you guys.
Bye, guys.
Speak
Love
to
you
you soon.
guys. Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
Camille. Good seeing you.
You too.